TV, television, the boob tube, the TV. We're talking about TV. Today, we're talking about when the Lizzie Bennet Diaries and other Pemberley properties ended up on the television. Ended up when a human decided for them to be there and the consequences of that. We have our first Pemberley pal on the show today. Someone who I brought on because either he was going to have to brief me extensively on all of the details, or I could just make him explain them. This will undoubtedly be a long conversation, and the least edited version of that will be available on my Patreon. My name is Ashley Clements.
And my name is Brendan Bradley, and these are the Look Back Diaries. There is still not a theme song, so nobody can sing along. Do 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 do.
I mean, official theme song. We have also engineered this so that we are in the same room.
It's true. Which is normal for us, to be fair.
Yeah.
Different for the show.
We realized that if we tried to film this sitting next to each other, Lizzie Bennet style, that would be a terrible show.
And harder to edit.
We are a household with multiple cameras. So here we are crammed into the smallest room in the house, which is my office. But look, we gave you a backdrop.
That's true.
I have my backdrop.
Yes.
But I'm just prepping you all that we're in the same room because we will be talking like this at times.
You don't want to awkwardly talk to each other, but at camera?
Well, we're going to do
little both?
Some.
All right.
But this also gives me the opportunity to I can office it.
Yeah, I can feel that.
Yeah.
That's nice. All right.
All right. So I feel like you need no introduction. But for those who don't know, Brendan was, in terms of his relationship to Pemberley, he's a cast member of Frankenstein MD, but has a long history with many players in this going back before we knew each other.
Yeah, pre-Pemberley.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very deep relationship with so many, a constellation of the people from the Pemberley world and the web world in general.
Well,
tell them about it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I first started doing web content in 2006, started uploading videos to the internet. And very quickly, there was this website called YouTube that was very cool that you could put videos on and be on the front page, which was amazing. And other strangers would see your videos. And commercials started then hosting contests for you to upload a commercial, like a fake video or a branded video with your friends. And they would buy them for $30,000. Which was amazing. So my roommates and friends and I would make these commercials. And there was an online community that would meet up at a bar called Busby's in mid-Wilshire in Los Angeles. And we would literally swap equipment, swap ideas, be like, what are you working on? Who has a basement? It was this incredible swap meet of creativity. And at the time, I was becoming involved in all of these web shows and getting to know like Felicia Day and Cindy Parikh and the Fine Brothers and working with all those people. Sarah Fletcher is one of the very first people from Frankenstein MD, one of the very first people I met in Los Angeles. Jenny Powell was the AD of a short film when I first moved to Los Angeles and met her that way. And Bernie was the photographer at all these meetups, which was brilliant because he would take these pictures of everybody.
And this is like before everyone had an iPhone in their
pocket. Exactly. So like has this very nice camera. He's at all the parties. He's also a creator and a writer, but he's taking pictures of everybody. And then everyone wants the photos because they're like, hey, I had all these photos of this cool meetup. And so everybody then had to become friends with Bernie to get the photos, which was brilliant. Like great marketing.
You were saying earlier off camera.
Yeah.
You were saying that you were all making scrappy little web series in each other's apartments.
Yes.
And that is exactly how Lizzie Bennet started.
Well, and so if I can back into that a little bit.
Okay.
So Bernie wrote a web series called Compulsions. Craig Frank was the star of the show. And they were roommates at one point. And from that, part of this like culture of us all making web series, I made a web series called Squatters that I cast everybody I knew in. And we had a lot of like success with that. I got to go take it into Comedy Central and start developing it there as maybe a TV show. We're going to get to that later. But this idea of we were all making these weird little scrappy things basically on favors and borrowed equipment with each other. And no one was succeeding, right? Like no one was hitting or going viral. Like occasionally you'd have a better performing video, but 10,000 views was awesome. Like everyone was very excited about having a couple thousand views on their content. And only people like Felicia were getting hundreds of thousands on the content. But even then, I remember the first time one of her videos hit 1 million. And we were all like, it's happening. Like people are watching this. This is crazy. We all worked together on these projects, which was really fun and really awesome. But you're also seeing this balance of we want to make narrative content, we want to tell stories, but it's really hard to like put out the volume of content the YouTube algorithm requires. And so I think that as we unpack a lot of the conversation today, for me, I'm always wanting to couch it in there's new stuff, there's like cool new stuff that each person was breaking open. And then there's nice stuff. There's nice stuff that happened for some or all of these projects that we all had relation with. We all were a part of. Some new stuff was happening for each show. Like Lizzie Bennett was the first literary adaptation of a series, and that was very cool and special and set off this incredible genre. And it was so cool to see that happen for my friends. My friends were doing this cool thing that people were paying attention to. And then there's nice stuff that happened along the way of different deals and different opportunities, but I don't think any of that was new. I think a lot of that was just our encountering different components of the entertainment industry for something that was trending or successful. And I think that those two conversations are important to like track as we get into the mushy business side of it all.
Right. Like Lizzie Bennett hit for a lot of reasons, one of which is absolutely Hank Green.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
another is because it's an adaptation of an extremely well loved story.
Right.
So we kind of had this combination of like Vlogbrothers fans and like Austinites that were kind of like our
Sure.
initial fan base. And then, there was like a certain level of virality to it. But everyone on the Lizzie Bennett creative team has acknowledged that the first narrative vlog show, meaning like fictional vlog actors playing vloggers, was Lonely Girl 15,
Which Jenny Powell produced.
and Maxwell Glick is in.
Yeah.
So like, yes, there's
But part of this incredible history,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
That these people had all been tinkering around the space and the genre, but trying to crack it, right? But really trying to figure out like what is the best way to tell these stories using this medium.
So these things were kind of happening, and there was this kind of lucky formula combination thing that happened for the Lizzie Bennett Diaries that hit because of a variety of factors and a lot of people's like previous development and experimentation and work in space.
And some of these exact people,
Right,
which
right,
was
right.
so cool to kind of see it get shuffled around and see these collaborations really start to bear fruit for the first time, which was really, really exciting. And honestly, I joined Frankenstein not really through Pemberley, but through Brett and Lon,
Mhm.
who wrote and directed.
Brett Register and Lon Harris, they were within this communities of Busby's people as well, right?
Very
Like
much.
all these people knew each other. Yeah, so I think when they had an idea for a show, they pitched it to Bernie because of like the connections of this, and that show is different as well because there was like a PBS digital
Mhm.
component to that, and we can
Which
get
was
into
probably
that.
through Hank Steele with the
Right, right,
Crash
right. Yes.
Course.
Just trying to tie in all of your connections
Yeah,
to all of Pemberley and all of these people,
sure.
and
Do we want to get even deeper? Julia Cho and I did a web
that's
series
true.
for
Subway.
Subway sandwiches, and then we did a road trip to South by Southwest together. We carpooled in my Prius to South by Southwest. We drove 23 straight hours to Texas, got out of the car, and I introduced her to Bernie Sue at a bar.
Wow.
And
That's
like it's just
crazy.
crazy then to like realize that she was on the show later. I was like, that's nuts. That's great. It felt like I was introducing my families. And
Wow.
Jessica Andres and I went to NYU together and I
Right?
directed her in the Laramie Project.
Yeah. So despite the fact that we are going to celebrate our 10-year anniversary later this year, you have known a lot of these players for much longer than that. By the way, if this is the first time you're learning that Brendan and I are a couple,
Surprise!
but like the reason that we weren't public for so long
Uh-huh.
is because of how weird and sort of like scrutinized, violated in some ways I felt from the fan attention on my love life
Sure.
during the Lizzie Bennett Diaries.
But we have both had the very best of the internet and the very worst of the internet.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
think that when you live in that space, you become very protective about how much and when of your personal life you open up to the internet. Like that is a balanced conversation. You and I have both had a stalker
Yeah.
that has figured out where we live.
Mhm.
Like that's not good.
Yep.
That's very scary.
Yeah.
And so but then on that other side of it, there's the outpouring of immense connection and
Yeah.
love and community
Yeah.
that you get from the internet. So you take the good with the bad, but it also means we've always been very, and we've talked a lot about what parts of our lives are for us and what parts of our lives are for our career and
Hmm.
for the world.
Right. And I think I don't want to have to jump through hoops to hide the fact that like I spend the majority of my time with this person, but
We do a lot of this.
we do. Like we like to talk. And
So
so
get ready.
that's immediately why I was like, this is gonna be long.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
so we should just buckle in.
Pack a
Um
lunch.
have some
Pour some
water.
tea. We're going to.
Okay, that was an incredibly long introduction.
It really was, but I think that it's important to know, especially as we get into the business of show. For me, these were my friends.
Hmm.
These were my friends for so many years. We made so much online nonsense together. There's so much video that some of us kept up and some of us took down that was out there in our early experimentations of trying to make an industry out of this thing. Like part of what I like to continually say, and I'm so proud of you for making this show and for everything that you've brought out of this show and like really opening yourself up and the business side of it to people, and reliving some of these experiences. It is part of this kind of crazy cosmic moment with the Writers Guild strike that it's unlocking all these things that systemically in Hollywood, it took Hollywood 15 years to learn the broken business model that we all knew back in 2008. We were all grappling with this like, how do we put out this volume of content? How do we keep up with this demand? How do we make this algorithm to work? None of this is monetizing correctly. We were dealing with all these conversations and problems, and we were trying to find solutions together. And there were moments where projects like The Guild or Lizzie Bennett touched on an opportunity to possibly unlock or question some of that. And I think that it's really fascinating to have those conversations 10 years later when we're in the midst of a strike, pretty much about big streaming and big content.
Yeah, it is kind of a wild coincidence that these things have coincided. But when this video goes up, that will be the beginning of the eighth week of the writer's strike. It has struck me several times that some of the things that happened with and around the Lizzie Bennett diaries are just this little microcosm of the larger things. And when we were talking about this earlier off camera, that was a perspective that it was very helpful for you to remind me that we can bring to this because we're going to tell you a story that doesn't have a happy ending. This is a story of how we got screwed. And rather than just dwell in the kind of like icky feelings of that. And I think it's important to tell the truth. So we're going to tell our experience of that, but rather than just kind of go like and the bad guys won, to put it in the context of this larger call for change and the rising labor movement that's happening beyond just Hollywood and why people are so ready to fight.
Well, it's the perfect academic case study for all of it and what might be coming.
Hmm.
And I think
Hmm.
that as Lizzie Bennett fans, I think that you all had this unique experience of having been a part of a franchise that touched on a constellation of all these issues, actually tried them out and went to the edge of what is actually legally the way it's supposed to go down, and saw it hurt the creatives that you love. And so when people are asking, what are they striking about? What are they what why are they complaining? You are actually armed with so much more information that can help get that message out and can help really educate other people on why this matters
Hmm.
and why we've got to fix this before we can move forward.
All right, so let's actually get into this specific issue.
Sure.
So, Kickstarter stuff wrapped in
Do you know what television is?
2014, and also, was it 2014 that you shot Frankenstein?
Correct.
For both of us, then, like 2014 was kind of like the end of us having any business with Pemberley
Yeah.
Digital. And then 2015 happens, 2016, 2017.
Well, and it's important to note in 2015 and 16, we make non-transferable.
Yes, we make.
So we're producing
Mhm.
a larger scale production with a lot of moving mechanics and parts that's going to get distributed in a lot of new ways. Because again, I'd only produced web content at that time.
That's our independent feature length film, non transferable.
In that time, here we've gone from working in web,
Hmm.
and I'm starting to move away from my web career. You're starting to move from your web career. And we then produce something that is web friends, web adjacent, using scrappy web techniques to make a feature film that's a lot more polished, that then gets sold in the traditional marketplace. And through that, we're signing big agreements and meeting with lawyers
And
and
learning about
distribution companies. And
deliverables
exactly. And so
and
I think that that also sets the stage for what's to come when some of this stuff starts happening
right.
in 2017.
So in 2017, let me tell you a story. I was in an acting class, and we were taking a quick break, and I was scrolling on the Twitters, and someone had tweeted at me a photo that they had taken of the Lizzie Bennet Diaries on TV and said something about how cool it was that the Lizzie Bennet Diaries was on TV. And I was like, what? Like I like I was dumbstruck. Like I wasn't making words. And I remember like going back into my acting class, and my acting teacher clocked something about me, and she's like, "What's going on with you?" And I was like, "I on TV? I my show, which please recall ended in 2013. So like we are 4 years later, and I'm like, I'm on television." My acting teacher's immediate reaction is like, "You're gonna get paid a lot of money for that." And I was like, "Am I?" And they're like, "Yeah, they have to." And so it's funny because it's true
It's true.
that am supposed to be. So, but I go home and I go to Brendan and I go, "Five is not
And I speak Ashley.
He does. And so then we began investigating that.
Yep, we found a breakdown,
A deadline
a
article.
deadline article
Yes, we
about
found a deadline article
the sale.
that announced that Bernie's new company, Canvas Media, had brokered a sale with Sinclair Media, which is a major media conglomerate. To put it in deadline is good for the company.
Yes, it's a
because
tool. It's advertising.
Exactly.
So we found that article. I was traveling. I made a film called Baby X that was going on the festival circuit. So I go to Richmond and find it in the TV guide of my sister's cable, and then set up a tripod and my phone and recorded us being on television from cable and showing, here I am in the TV guide, here I am going into the scheduled, whatever time slot it was, hitting play. Here it's now playing the full episode. And that is when we first started to learn that it didn't have credits.
Right. So obviously, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries is not the standard length of a television show. For a television show with commercials, the standard length for what we call a half-hour show is 22 minutes. But as you have seen, the show on YouTube doesn't have on-screen credits. The credits are in the YouTube description. And here we are on television without credits, which we know is a union violation. We also know it's a union violation for the show to be on TV without
without a conversation. But I think you just pointed something out that I think is really important. A major fight during the original writer's strike and early YouTube culture was this idea of the credits being in the description box and not on screen. And the argument that got made, and this is where like big tech mingling with big media can become problematic, is YouTube's algorithm, because if you stop watching the video at the 90% mark, it punishes the video. We normalized removing credits from these YouTube videos because it would damage the algorithm. Rather than going to YouTube and saying, hey, this stuff has to have these credits, this is legal, you're going to basically count 90% as a full watch or something like that. Like we could have reverse engineered this so that crediting was always intact. But instead, we normalized a practice that's actually a gray area
right
in how credits are supposed to even work for
right. Whereas
content
like
online.
Netflix is like, we're just gonna make these so small,
So
you can't
small
read them,
and go
here's
really
the next
fast. And
episode.
exactly. But they still play. They're still there.
Right. People deserve credit, and unions have fought for that for a reason.
Right.
So you now had your own video of us,
Correct.
of a Pemberley show being on television,
Right.
not having credits.
Correct.
Okay, so
now
you got to talk to the union.
So I have to talk to my union, and this is an important distinction to make because it sounds very scary to file a claim, but that isn't like suing somebody. That isn't like this big legal action. People file claims every day. And it's for all sorts of weird things. And a lot of the times there's actually like, if you don't get your overtime or if you didn't get a wardrobe bump or something. I started in SAG in background acting and then stand-in to get my credits to be able to join. And there were all sorts of little things we would file little claims for like $30. And production would look at it and go, oh, you're right. We missed that.
SAG has a residual claims department. This is what they do. They hunt down residuals from everybody,
Right.
like from independent small producers, but also from like ABC
Sure.
and HBO.
But it's very standard. It happens every day. It's
Yep,
very common.
yep.
And in my experience, you immediately know how the claim is going to go down because people either immediately go, oh, shoot, we
And
messed
by
up.
people, you don't mean SAG. You mean
I mean,
how
yeah,
people
SAG,
respond
yeah,
to
SAG will ingest it, immediately let
So
them
when you
know.
say people, you mean like
Yeah.
producers.
Yes. So within 30 days, you pretty much know the producers are going, we messed up. Sorry, let's fix it. Or, this is going to be a thing. And a couple times in my life, it has been a thing. In this particular instance, filed a claim very shortly thereafter. Christine Linnell
Yeah,
writes
so
this lovely article.
we're going to look at that article in just a second. This all started in March, I believe.
Episodes started airing Valentine's Day, February 14th, the same day that Non-Transferable released.
Oh my God.
It was the identical
wow.
track. So I'm simultaneously, as an actor,
What a weird time.
watching a web series get put on television and not follow any protocol, while I have been handcuffed by every protocol in the book to try to release this little indie movie.
Yeah.
And I know the struggles and the pain with the union that it took to do that.
When you wanted to do things, you first went to the union and said,
I'd like to do a
allowed
thing.
to do this? Now, the union is always going to have more power over an actor, producer like Brendan than someone who is not a SAG member, because SAG can always threaten Brendan with being expelled from the union.
Yeah.
But with non-transferable,
Which, put that in the back of your brain for when we get into other union stuff later.
Put it in your mind pocket.
Oh, there's a mind pocket.
Well, this will shock you. It's a weird thing I made up one day and then kept doing.
Oh, yeah.
As like a recurring bit.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you sell a mind pocket at the merch store?
Coming
Do we
soon.
have hats with a big pocket on the back of it?
Why don't hats have pockets? For example, we had an opportunity with one distributor to do a traditional theatrical release. Like, it would have been small and limited. It's an independent film, but like
In theaters.
in movie theaters, fancy time. And the reason that was not allowed was because non-transferable was made on a low budget agreement.
Correct.
The minimums for that are quite low.
Very low.
And it was a very low budget movie. And you learned by checking with the union before you did anything that when you travel SAG actors internationally, that automatically for a theatrical release would need to bump everyone
Correct.
up to
the fullest theatrical contract.
Not just people who traveled, but the entire
cast retroactively, because the entire project will now have to migrate. If then we were going to want to enjoy the exhibition and the monetization of a full film that would travel internationally, everybody's contracts had to be upgraded so that then they would participate in higher compensation, in box office revenues, in any sort of DVD revenues that came along, the whole waterfall.
And I'm certain
revenue.
that there are reasons why those protections are in there.
At the time, it sucked.
It sucked.
I was upset that we weren't going to have a theatrical
Right.
release, but I also was actually very proud of my union. I was like, hey, like, there are these lines in the sand. There's these very clear guidelines. We are on the skirt of one of them. We're all going to kind of like do this polite thing where I go like, cool, I'm now better educated. We're not going to get to make this money on the film, but that's okay. And we lost that distribution deal and we had to go find a different one. So then to have to start seeing people who didn't follow those protocols, didn't check in with the union, I'm now filing a claim.
Well, and prior to knowing each other, you had made a web series called Squatters.
It's true.
So far back that the whole thing's in 720, is that correct?
Yeah, they didn't have HD cameras at the time.
But despite that, you had an opportunity to possibly put it on Comedy Central, right?
Correct. We did a development deal with Comedy Central to actually turn it into a full TV show. They went with Workaholics instead. They were literally with Adam Devine and me in like opposite meetings. And they had done mail order comedy on YouTube for years. They absolutely were ready to be on a television show, and Squatters was not. And Squatters does not hold up in any regard, not just resolution. Then there was another company, another TV network, like a TBD, like a TBD or a Sinclair.
Ultimately, the like specific network with Sinclair.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're familiar with this at all, there is a network called Chive that takes
That sounds big.
YouTube videos, like trick shots and prank
Yeah,
videos
yeah,
and stuff
just
like
like
that, and just airs them on a loop all the time as like bar content. There are these networks that have taken and repackaged online content. It's just been non-union, non-scripted online content. And so TBD, I think, was trying to do something similar with scripted content, is really what the brainchild here was. Another network tried to do this back in 2011 with Squatters, approached me, and I mathed out what the residual, because I would have had to pay the residuals up front
right.
and the contract transfers up front. Like going to theatrical,
Yeah,
I would have had to go to TV.
but so pause for a second
Yeah.
because I just want to make sure that we've explained that. Because, for example, non-transferable, we had finished filming, but we had not released the film. You would have had to raise everyone's base pay.
Correct.
Like that wasn't even a conversation about residuals.
Right.
Squatters was completed
It had aired.
and had released. So like we are talking about a syndication, and we have spoken about residuals in specific regards to the DVD. In terms of a DVD, they are actually based on splitting
A pool of
a
the
pool
revenue,
of the
a
revenue.
pot of the revenue.
But for it being on television, that is based on where it airs and how often it airs, and has nothing to do with like how much money it makes being on television. There's just percentages that have been figured out that like residuals are owed. Residuals are owed to exhibit content, except on the internet. It's part of the strike. But so what you calculated, and because this is also specifically what this whole Pemberley on TV problem is, what you
Correct.
calculated was what you would owe in residuals to, as was explained to you at the time, right? You would have had to upgrade everyone to a television contract. So
Correct.
that's sort of the same problem as the non-transferable, right?
Right.
Like,
Migrate everyone
just
over.
to start, everyone's contract gets upgraded, and that comes with a big check.
Does.
And then for ongoing distribution of that content,
however many times they air it, wherever it airs,
that they would get residuals. That was based on, residuals are based on your base pay. So the
Correct.
more pay you made
originally,
initially, the higher your residuals are going to be. Residuals always taper smaller over
yes,
time.
yes, which is why they needed to, when you migrate to television, up that base
Right,
pay.
because at the time,
Because it was web
everyone's
series
rate was
pay,
$100
not
a
television
day.
pay.
Right. And television pay is a lot more than
It's true.
that.
It's true.
And so
But so I mathed all this out.
the story about Squatters is that you asked the union in advance.
Yes.
And learned that it would be cost prohibitive, and it means that you knew exactly what that no, that was based on a different contract
And a different year.
A different year. The rates for both web and television would have gone up since then. But so you already had multiple experiences where you had gone to the union before you made a deal. And the union had told you what would be required in order for you to be in compliance with the union as a producer, not as an actor, but like for the union contracts that he'd made everyone he had hired sign, that in order to be in compliance, this is what would have to happen. And both times it was a sad thing to have to say no to.
Yes.
It was
like
it was a bummer, but you understood
I was being protected.
Those protections were there.
In all of those circumstances, it was a bummer for Brendan the producer. But it was very safe for Brendan the actor.
Right.
Because Brendan the actor didn't want to be on television without being paid.
Right.
Didn't want to be in theaters without being paid. Right. So in many ways, bifurcating that is important.
So our conversations are always like this. We do this all day. We're setting the stage for a lot of things here. But so to take us back, we find out the show is on television. We find out Deadline article. You find it on actual TV, and that means filing a SAG claim. You end up filing a claim, but on behalf of all of us.
Of everyone, yes.
And like I will just absolutely own that I did nothing in all of this. Well, because you did a lot of work.
Yes.
And I was privy to that because we lived together.
Right.
But you really took that on for like all the Pemberley actors, and the fact that you were like, I know what to do, just meant I was very happily like, Brendan's on it.
So there's a residual claims department. There is a claim form, like an intake form. It has space to like go over what was the production. You have to look up the original like production ID numbers.
Right, because SAG has an ID number for every project.
Right.
And you can't start producing until you're approved.
And then you get into like what was the original contract you were working under.
Right,
so you have to give them a copy of that.
Right. So some of these Pemberley shows were on different years.
And then what I'm doing is laying out, these are for 3 different shows. But my show is included in this sale.
So he goes ahead and like proactively.
Yeah, I'm just like, look, I'm a part of this library of
you're gonna
content
have to
that
look
got
at
sold.
These 3
Right.
shows together.
But I'm designating specifically, here's where the shows aired on YouTube.
Mhm.
So this is their first airing, and this is where we understand that the shows were made to be aired because the contract is a made for new media contract. So this was made for new media. Here's where it was on new media.
TV
Then
is old media.
and then any place that it was also exhibited, I'm just including it as a snapshot of here's the story of these shows. So I include things like, for example, the Emmys for both Lizzie Bennett and Emma, because I'm going, these shows garnished this attention. This is
Mhm.
why they were probably bought, as they had this status,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. There was a relationship with PBS for Frankenstein and wanting to acknowledge that. And that it's not airing on PBS, but it was produced with PBS and what that relationship might be.
And the DVDs,
And
right?
so,
Like,
and then the DVDs linked to the Kickstarter. These DVDs were sold. I didn't oversee any of
which
that,
only
but
affects one Pepperly show.
right. But basically, I'm going through all the publicly available information of
And
the
then
business of these
I don't know
shows.
about the other ones, but Lizzie Bennett was also like sold as digital downloads
Correct.
through
So
Amazon and
I link, yeah.
iTunes.
So I linked to the Amazon and the iTunes, and then the article that we found in Deadline about the sale
Mhm.
of this content, and that was basically my initial claim to SAG to say, here's everything I know, here's my contract, here's where I think we're in violation. Now here's a video of it airing on television on
Yeah,
cable.
here's evidence.
Here's the website for TBD, this company. They claim that they syndicate this content across 6 continents. They have stations everywhere.
And
So now,
international residuals
so
are
exactly. So now we're
a whole
talking
other
about
thing.
both a domestic and foreign residuals. So I don't know what those rules exactly are. So but here's more information. And so I'm just handing that data trove over and being given a rep that is then going to oversee that project. And usually it starts, they try to identify who the original rep was for the show.
Mhm.
And so that we
But this is 5 years after
correct.
Lizzie Bennett
Yes.
started, and
But the rep for Frankenstein was still there.
Ah.
So we started with the rep for Frankenstein and then conversations beginning with the new media department and with the residual department. So that's where the claim begins
and
in
then
February,
February or early March,
of
Yeah.
2017.
and then they would contact Pemberley Digital.
Correct. And Sinclair and TBD. Wait, they'd
Uh-huh.
probably contact everybody to
Right.
say, who are we supposed to be talking to? Who is overseeing residuals for this?
But like all of this is to say there's a clear procedure for this,
Yes.
and there are intermediaries who are supposed to do this. Like you're not supposed to have to sleuth this out. Like we're not supposed to call up Bernie and be like, what is happening?
Right. Well, and this is part of the writer's strike as well, right? Is that there's this fear of punitive measures of like not wanting to speak out of class or not wanting to complain. And so
No,
these
just the
structures,
reason that agents exist,
right?
so that someone else can be bad cop,
Yes.
and you can just show up and be like, I am fun to
Yes.
work with.
So that's where the claim starts.
Mhm.
And then the TooFab article
Yes.
comes out.
So first of all, just huge shout out to Christine Linnell who wrote this. I asked her if she was okay taking credit for this because TooFab for some reason makes every article written by TooFab staff. They are not unionized, or their names would be on it. But Christine Linnell, I think, really started as a fan of the show and then went on, as she acknowledges in this article, to work for Pemberley Digital. She came on sometime.
She was on Frankenstein.
She was on Frankenstein. She was on Emma. She reminded me actually that she was there the day that I shot the bonus episodes where like Lizzie Bennett was on the Emma approved set. Yeah, so she for a few years was working in and around.
And she's in non-transferable. She got us the office location for Amy. That was
oh my god,
that was her connection. And then she's working at one of the little desks.
So huge shout out to Christine.
Yeah.
We love you. And so she had some insight into this and was, at the time writing for TooFab. As it says, YouTube series raises questions over Hollywood ripping off digital creators. Exclusive. And then it's a brilliantly chosen photo for this because, of course, like I am just grimacing. It's enjoyable to me. Let's go through Christine's article. TooFab has learned that a deal to air the Emmy Award-winning series The Lizzie Bennett Diaries and PBS digital studio series Frankenstein MD on cable television caught the actors, writers, and producers completely by surprise. Not a single person was told anything, actor Sarah Fletcher told TooFab. Oh yeah, sorry, if we have not emphasized that, I mean, I think it's clear based on our shock. But like, we didn't get an email. Nobody,
Yeah, no one knew.
we did not know that.
Yeah, communication, communication, communication.
I couldn't be excited to see the Lizzie Bennet Diaries on TV because even though I had not had the experiences that you had had with, you know, things not being able to happen for you because of what it would have cost them in the union, I still knew that if it was on TV, I knew that you got paid differently for TV.
Yeah.
And now many of the people connected to the deal are wondering if they will be paid properly. Spoiler alert, no. In December 2016, Sue's second company, Canvas Media Studios, which produced Style Hall's Vanity series, announced a deal with Sinclair Broadcast Group to syndicate their digital shows on a new internet-focused cable channel called TBD. Canvas quietly included the quietly doing a lot of work there. The Lizzie Bennet Diaries, Emma approved, and Frankenstein MD in the deal, recutting the YouTube videos into 30-minute television episodes with commercial breaks, which means 22-minute episodes. The episodes have been airing on TBD in regular rotation since mid-February.
So just plant that seed in the face pocket. What's it called?
Your mind pocket.
Mind pocket, excuse me. Here we are a month in, and
over a month, right?
A reporter has contacted TBD Sinclair and is told on record that they are in regular rotation, whatever that may mean.
Right.
But it does mean that a month later, episodes have been regularly.
Right, they're still airing. This goes on to say, none of the cast, writers, or producers from these three shows were notified before the episodes launched, and there are no closing credits citing their work. End of March, still no closing credits. Individuals with knowledge of the situation told TooFab. And that's, I think, well put. No one in the cast, writers, or producers, because that also means in the case of Frankenstein MD, PBS. This says a PBS Digital Studios representative told TooFab they were not aware of the deal and declined to comment further. Like, these business practices are not smart.
They're not smart?
They're not,
How do you say?
How do you say that in a nicer way? It's not smart. Frankenstein cast and crew only found out after actor Brendan Bradley happened to see a fan tweeting about the episodes on March 1st and asked her to send him screenshots.
Sarah does really the heavy lifting in this article.
When Fletcher contacted SAG-AFTRA to ask about the residual payments for Frankenstein, she was told the paperwork hadn't even been filed yet. It was very clear that Pemberley didn't talk to the union at all. Meanwhile, a SAG-AFTRA representative told Bradley that Pemberley still owed residual payments from several years ago when its web series was moved from YouTube to home video. Right. So when you sent that whole thing, because this comes out of the mind pocket of, oh yeah, hey, remember how I told you we never got paid our DVD residuals? So here we are now, like 3 years after the DVDs were like finished being distributed, when SAG pulls up all of these claims, those residuals were calculated at the time. Like, it's in the budget what they owed. It just, like, it's on the projected budget side and that it's blank on the hard cost side. Like, there's no record. They don't have a record of paying it.
Yes.
And immediately SAG could just go, well, they owe these.
Exactly. Yes, and that was the first win of this claim.
Right.
Is that the very first email I get back from Residual New Media and the SAG rep that oversaw Frankenstein is, okay, we don't really yet know what's going on with this television thing. We're going to have to really look into this. Please be patient. There is no question that this move over to DVD triggers certain obligations. Those should be paid immediately.
And none of us even remembered that that was a thing anymore. Like, all we would have had to do was file a claim. But with all the Kickstarter stuff, all the, like, we were getting checks, we got merch checks, like, not one of us remembered that we were owed DVD residuals, or we would have done something about it. But as I have spoken about, like, intentionally pushed a lot of this out of my mind because it was not fun. And so this was like, oh, right, the DVD residuals. Writers and actors were not officially informed until March 7th, 3 weeks after the show started airing on TBD. In an email obtained by TooFab, Sue told them, we will be adhering to all WGA and SAG determined syndication residuals through this deal, but did not offer further explanation or specify when payments would be made. But Green, Hank, said that he hasn't worked on any Pemberley series since Lizzie Bennet and couldn't comment on how the business is run. I do still have a stake in the shows, but I'm not involved in decision making. Now, this is a quote I would forget that I read years later when I contacted Hank about Lizzie Bennet Diaries, but at that time he told me that he only kept 10%. It's still weird to have not even informed Hank, but technically Hank should also receive 10% of the profits.
But I think that in a lot of this, I've heard you mention off camera that there's concern about painting Hank with the same brush. And I think that in some ways, I've really come to understand this journey, having made Squatters, having made Non-Transferable, the real heartbreak of having someone else take your show from you and do really stupid things, not even cruel, just so stupid, but so mishandled
Yeah.
on behalf of so many other people and still wave your name around. Like, because to be clear, in every article I've ever seen since, and every single post ever, every Kickstarter update is Hank and Bernie. Hank, like, to hide under the cover of your name while creating such misconduct is devastating. And my heart just goes out to Hank for that, because I can't imagine. He's obviously run a lot of other businesses not this way. So it is a game of which of these things is not like the others.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've seen some comments of people saying, like, very upset to learn this about Hank, or like, has Hank weighed in on this? And, I think, first of all, one of those people was invited to participate in the Look Back Diaries and one wasn't. So you can surmise from that, like, how I feel. But also, I think that people feel like they don't know what to think when they're hearing that, like, he was attached to this thing and, like, technically a boss on something that was run so poorly, because they're like, but Hank seems like a really good person. And, like, yeah, that's because you have over a decade of Hank showing you who he is through his actions. You have years and years of creating educational content and working with many different charities, creating his own charities. Like, since before I knew he existed, he was doing the Project for Awesome fundraisers. Like, he walks the walk. And, to quote Maya Angelou, when people show you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
And he has shown us all who he is. Like, Hank seems like a good guy because Hank's a good guy.
And to that end, sometimes being that nice, that altruistic, means you're conflict averse. He's not gonna necessarily be the bad guy.
It means that you are going to believe that everyone else is good too.
That is very true.
Assume
that is very true.
Everyone else has as much integrity as you do.
I'll really again point out how proud I am of you of this show, because I know you've put a lot of work into it, but it's also been hard. Is you have struggled with this idea of, we get taught that to be nice is to be professional, but to be professional is to do the work, and then to call it how it is.
Right.
And especially when we get into business, for a long time, you and I have really grappled with the cover we've provided to other people's bad behavior through the guise of it being nice and professional. And I think that there's this, we're having a great moment now. We've had some good moments over the last decade, and I hope we're continuing, where societally we're saying you can be a nice person and still call out someone else's not nice behavior.
Do no harm but take no shit.
Ooh, who said that?
Oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know who gets the original quote.
Okay. But anyway, just in Hank getting referenced here, it is one of these issues that he's gotten dragged into this thing that clearly he's not been a part of for years.
And like, I don't know that this wasn't the first time he was hearing about
it. It probably was.
When you contacted SAG, like, we started a big email with all the affected actors.
The Pemberley Pals.
I say we.
I contacted all the Pemberley Pals.
Well, and I don't even know that, like, between the two of us, we had everyone's email.
We didn't. I did say, if there's people I'm missing, please.
So like more, because there would have been an Emma approved gap, essentially. Like, we had some of those emails, but not all of them. And so, like, getting everyone included so that, like, everyone affected by this SAG claim was up to date on what, and also being informed, like, hey, this has been filed. So, like, we don't all have to file this.
Exactly.
Like, and, yes, we can communicate amongst ourselves, but, like, none of us emailed Hank. We also would never have guessed that he didn't know. We would not have guessed that PBS Digital Studios were not informed. Like, would not have guessed.
Yeah.
So back to the article. Why is this a problem? Tochterman said that Pemberley has and will continue to honor its contracts with its creators and talent. You said that we have? First of all, you don't work for Pemberley, so
Right.
why are you their representative? And also, I got receipts. No, you have not honored your contract. So, like, take your foot out of your mouth. Not only will these series reach a broader audience, all who are involved in their production will benefit as well. How, David? Still waiting to find out on that front. Fletcher, who starred in the Secret Girlfriend web series that was turned into a Comedy Central sitcom in 2009, acknowledged that actors don't always need to be informed of new distribution deals. If you're on a TV show and they decide to put it on the internet, they don't tell you, she said. If you're on a TV show and they sell it overseas, a lot of the time they don't say anything. You just get residual checks in the mail. Things get murkier, however, when you look at TBD's unusual approach of putting made-for-the-internet content directly on television with all credits removed. And also, like, that's not, I just want to point out, like, it's not accurate to say that the credits were removed because they were never on it.
Right.
Like, they were always in the YouTube description. And when I say, going back to our conversation about non-transferable, when I say we understand deliverables, what is that nonsense word?
It's a list of things that you have to deliver to the distributor for them to be able to fully never need to contact you again to be able to distribute the content. So a great example is breaking out the sound stems,
Right.
so that if they ever want to dub it into French or Italian, which they did with non-transferable, they can literally keep in time sync all the music, all the sound effects, everything else. They can just take out our voices and replace those voices. So it's something like that that you would never upload to a YouTube video.
Right.
You would never think about making for a YouTube
And
video.
you may not have even created on different
Exactly.
tracks
You might not
like
have
that.
those different tracks.
Right. That is required. Like,
Correct.
that wasn't like negotiable.
Correct.
That's just like, oh, every international market
Right.
requires these things. So we learned a lot of weird stuff about
Right.
deliverables.
But one of the other things is all the talent contracts, all the crew contracts, and the crediting for both the content itself. Like, so you have to deliver the scroll of what goes in the end credits. You have to deliver like a Word document of that same text, so they have it.
So that, like, when you're clicking the info button,
That's another deliverable. Because you choose who goes there. Part of my deliverable is what goes in that block, which actors' names, what order, who gets counted as a producer
but
in that
also,
block.
like, you would never expect someone else to create
No, it's part of your
on-screen
contract.
credits for you.
It's delivery is not considered complete. Payment is not made until deliverables have been satisfied.
Now,
And they then give you a list of deliverables.
Clearly, since TBD was specifically looking to put web content online, clearly they had a different set of deliverables. Clearly, they understood that, like, no one had isolated audio stems of the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. There's no, like, common mechanism by which a distribution company is like, and now we will figure out what the credits should say and create animated scrolling credits. Like,
that would never happen.
So to say, oh, this is some kind of, like,
oversight
mistake, or they were removed, is actually to say, I mean, it is an oversight, I guess, in as much as, but the oversight is entirely on Pemberley for not providing them in the first place.
Correct.
Like, that's not on TBD even a little bit.
No,
they put on the screen what they were given.
Yes, but it goes back to that original conversation in 2007 where writers said, why are you removing credits? Because it is standard that there should be a credit scroll at the end of every piece of media. And so it is one of these holdovers that, because we nudged it a little bit on YouTube, now when it comes back on this other side, it actually messes up a whole way that the business is done.
A SAG-AFTRA spokesperson declined to comment directly on the situation, but told TooFab that, quote, residuals obligations vary depending on the type of contract to which a picture is signed. Whether or not the applicable contract changes depends on the circumstances of a show's distribution. They urged SAG-AFTRA members to reach out to their union representatives if they have questions. There are similar concerns among the show's writing teams, according to individuals with knowledge of the situation. Because the YouTube series were re-edited, there's a possibility the writers will only be paid residuals per each 30-minute episode rather than each individual video. Exactly the kind of thing that would have come up in negotiations had they taken place, right? Because then each 22-minute episode has multiple writers.
Right.
Some even worry that because the web series were so low budget on their first run, the writers could be owed next to nothing. As the lines between digital and traditional entertainment continue to blur, the TBD deal highlights a risk that companies could try to avoid paying full rates to their cast and crew by producing cheap online content and then take advantage of loopholes to move it to more profitable platforms.
When would that have ever happened?
Bradley told TooFab, I know it's so weird for me to read you as Bradley told TooFab the issue is very important to him, and he continues to urge SAG-AFTRA to be more proactive about how digital creators are paid. Residuals should be based on exhibition, not revenues, he said. We have the tools to calculate the exact difference in scale for new media content that gets 1,000 versus 100,000 views. We know the actual cost per click is different on iTunes than it is on YouTube. We have already negotiated and determined the value of syndication on various types of television and physical media. This stuff isn't new, and it's all trackable in real time. While Bradley said there's room for debate over emerging technology like virtual reality or 360-degree videos, you hadn't even gotten into that. That's crazy. The rules for content airing on television are quite clear. When it comes to traditional outlets, the unions have already negotiated and determined the appropriate value, and it needs to be honored. Ultimately, ubiquitous professional content for free is not sustainable for anyone, he said. Full disclosure, the author interned with Pemberley Digital in 2014.
Hey, good job, Christine.
Thank you so much, Christine, for writing this article, because it's the only public record out there of anyone holding any of this accountable.
It does such a great snapshot of so much business weirdity.
Yeah.
That allows anyone who has been inside the business, like we sat there and stopped and started throughout you reading the article, because there's so much in there that someone from the business would go, well, that's not how it's done. Wait, that's not how that's done. Wait, they're part of this lawsuit as well. It just really paints a very clear picture of this was so badly handled.
Yeah.
This is obviously badly handled. This is a problem. It needs to be addressed. And it's crazy to think that now this article could have come out as part of the Burn It All Down.
The Vanity Fair article, which is an excerpt of the book,
Right.
Burn It Down.
But this could be right now about the writer's strike, about some very, very bad writing room that was handled very, very poorly in a show that was totally put somewhere it wasn't supposed to go.
To put this in context of larger Hollywood problems, is Pemberley Digital the first company to not properly handled residuals? No, that's why, as we were saying, there's an entire claims department. And you had this conversation yesterday. We were actually, between the two of us, figuring out how many independent projects we had ever worked on that paid any residuals, because it's common that independent films don't end up paying residuals. Now, we know, because of non-transferable, that when you sign a distribution deal, that is going to say, which means that this would absolutely have been in the deal that Canvas brokered for Pemberley to sign. Unclear. It would absolutely have been in some clause somewhere that said, and you, the person selling the content, in this case Pemberley Digital, in our case Jake's Ensemble, you will be responsible for residuals. Now, that's a really crappy thing for businesses to do, and they know that, and they don't care, because they just care about profit, because they are choosing where, as distributors, where that content goes, what countries it goes to, if it's on television. Whatever is happening is out of the hands of the person who sold it. And, to Brendan's point about researching in advance what those residual obligations would be, those residual obligations are often much more than those producers can afford to pay. And there have been, many claims filed. Often people don't even know that they need to file a claim. An actor cannot keep track of that. And even the person selling the content can't necessarily keep track of that, because they're not the only person who knows where it's going is the distributor.
Correct.
So that's just one of those kind of crappy things in business, and something that you knew to look out for. So you made sure that you were not on the hook for non-transferable residual.
Or SONA.
Right.
And lawyers hate it.
They do not want that.
And they will pretend all day, well, this is very standard, blah, blah, blah. And where I was able to get people to meet me and understand the analogy, because they just act like, well, of course we get to take it and do whatever we want with it, and you have to pay for it. As I said, I'm happy to go Dutch, but whoever chooses the wine pays the bill.
Sorry, that's just a very boomer sounding metaphor.
Well, I'm talking to a lot of boomers. But what was elegant about that in a lot of ways is I was saying, either you have to come to me every time you want to put it somewhere, and I will calculate whether it's worth it to me for you to distribute it there, or we're going to share in this expense. And so with non-transferable, any money that comes in, it immediately has to resolve its expenses. So if it triggered
So
residuals,
no one profits
yes,
before residuals have been
right.
paid out.
So and look, that's a whole other chapter for a whole other time. Those are also terrible people that did some shady business stuff. But we have received residual checks
Yeah, no,
from
but
non-transferable.
we did, to the best of our recollection, the only independent projects that have paid us residuals are ultimately, for me, the Lizzie Bennett Diaries,
Mhm.
for both of us, non-transferable,
Mhm.
and for everyone that we hired on that,
Mhm.
and then one other film that I did,
And then one other film
which
that I did.
was made into a DVD,
Right.
which I'm pointing over there because it's over there.
Or should I point to mine? Mine's over
Yeah,
there as well.
that's
Yeah, great.
helpful. But so basically
Yeah.
four independent projects
Right.
have we ever received residuals on. So
Residuals.
like it is enormously,
Right.
unfortunately, common that
But I wake up every week
Mhm.
to those adorable, we've seen them all the time, like a check for 32 cents from television and film that I've done at a more legitimate traditional tier, because to them that's just the cost of doing business. That's how this goes.
Right. And also like they have all the tracking in place to do their job.
Right.
So it's not, unfortunately, unusual for independent producers to not pay their residual obligations.
Or not know about them.
Right. But what is unique about this and what Christine helped put a spotlight on is that like there was this internet following. Like there were people who were paying attention. There were people who cared,
Mhm.
putting it in like a journalistic
Mhm.
way that lays it all out, does hold things accountable in a way that most independent projects don't
Absolutely.
get held.
Absolutely. And it also cements it as a case study that when we're having conversations about like what does happen to HBO's library now, if it's being taken down from Max,
Hmm.
if they suddenly now put it somewhere else because that was new media or that was SVOD, but they actually then put it on cable, like it's opening up this conversation of if someone else takes their library of content and does something like this, we need to make sure there's guidelines in place and that the guidelines are followed.
I'm going to now read that March 7th email
Great.
that Christine referenced. So
Perfect.
in terms of like what we had heard from Bernie, so I guess it was after you had filed the claim
Correct.
that they would have been, I don't remember. I don't know if anybody who found out about it contacted Bernie, but like neither of us did. So I don't entirely know
Right. What prompted this?
But March 7th. Hello, actors and writers of the Lizzie Bennett Diaries, Emma Approved and Frankenstein MD. You may have seen that the Pemberley shows, Lizzie, Emma, Frankenstein, are being syndicated as traditional formats on TV and other OTT streaming services. Put OTT, you don't have to put it all the way in your mind pocket. We're going to just talk about it in a second. I am letting you know that this is part of a new distribution partnership through this network, literally called TBD. Regardless of questionable naming of networks, we will be adhering to all WGA and SAG determined syndication residuals through this deal. I hope you're well. Now that we've been caught, we will be, OTT stands for over the top,
Yes.
which is stupid term.
Yeah.
That essentially has to do with how their content is getting onto the television.
The tubes, the pipes.
But it literally the tubes.
Yes.
In as much as the internet is a series of tubes.
Right.
Because it does use the internet to get to the television. So like,
If I may, it's a digital signal, not a terrestrial signal.
thank you. What do I know? Lord.
I just know because radio did all this a decade before television did it.
And at some point in there, it's only important because at some point in his negotiations with SAG, he did try to argue that because it was a digital transmission that he had not like that we shouldn't be upgraded to a television contract because actually it was all digital. And SAG said no.
Well, first he did find somebody in a different department to start to agree with him.
Oh, he just started calling around different.
And then I started getting looped in on a series of messages because, again, in the background of all of this is me fielding the claim with SAG and following up with them
Yeah, no, we're going to talk about
constantly and aggressively. But so, yes, at one point there was the beginning of an interpretation about OOT, but at that time the residual department had already written me a first ruling.
Yeah.
And so yes.
No, there's just so much. There's so much to cover. This is going to be 2 episodes. So let's be real. But so let's try to then, I guess, wrap up what this one will be. So yes, so that is the email that we had gotten. Then this article came out, and then literally that day, Bernie called you.
Yes. So Bernie called me. He was very upset. And he was very upset that I didn't come to him. And there's kind of two very fundamental flaws with that argument. First, I'm not supposed to go to him. I'm not supposed to go to a producer. I'm supposed to file a claim with my union. That is this protocol. This has existed for decades. Like, we can't pull the friend card after you've done something really crappy in business and say, oh, come on, man, why didn't you call me? So there's that error of conflation. But then also, you're saying, why didn't I call you when you didn't call us?
Yeah.
You never talked
Why
to
didn't
the
you
rest of
literally
us.
tell a single other person who this affected that it
Right.
was happening?
And what's so phenomenal, again, about Christine's article is she lays the breadcrumbs that just within this article, there are multiple people who have done similar deals or been a part of similar projects migrating between mediums. That if he'd asked Sarah, hey, what was the secret girlfriend deal? How did that go down? Like, who did you talk to? Or if he talked to me about the Neil DVD, he could have possibly gained an understanding for what might come, what the expectations might be. And the bitter irony in all of this, because I have found when we've gone into conversations about SONA or non-transferable, is that when I'm able to lay out the argument of what is going to be owed for the content, the true value of the content, the buyer has to then raise the price.
Mhm.
They've got to meet those demands. So
Right.
if he had been able to lay out, well, the move over to television might be this-ish, there's a window here, possibly, residuals are definitely going to be owed, blah, blah, blah. It might have put more money in his pocket and certainly in the pocket of the sales agents taking a percentage on top.
Right. So I don't remember exactly the order of when we got this information, and this call with you may have been the call in which he said, but like they were phone calls. One of them was with me. One of them was with you. He told you, and maybe it was this phone call, that he didn't make anything.
Yeah, he was like, hey, man, it was like no money. And again, there's that like no
Like
money
no money.
does a lot of lifting.
Because
But again,
I don't remember when this conversation happened, but I do remember that he told me that he'd made $30,000,
Right.
which is not no money.
It's not no money, but it's also, and it's why I planted the seed in the very beginning of the episode. It was the cost of a single 30-second YouTube commercial that we were making in 2008.
It is so much below. And look, when he says that he made $30,000, I don't know.
We
if
don't know what that means.
That's what Bernie pocketed, actually in a bank pocket, not a mind pocket. Or if that's what the overall deal was.
We don't
We
know.
know that Canvas would have taken a cut. We know that David Touchterman took a cut. Like,
Yeah, we just don't know what we
don't know, and we will never know because they're gonna like open the books and show us
unless someone randomly emails them to you.
Well, and also
which has happened before.
It's true, but also like even Bernie saying $30,000, we don't know that that number is true.
Right.
Like we don't know anything.
Right.
But that is the number that he told us at some point, and it's not smart. That's a terrible deal. You're selling 3 shows.
2 of them with Emmys.
It's just so undervaluing the contract, and I can't figure out exactly like where to end this one because I don't want to get too far into. I think we're gonna touch more on residuals in the next episode.
Well, I think then if we want to put sort of a button on this, when we go back to what it is to file a claim with SAG at all, you know very quickly, is this going to be a short fight or a long fight? Having him call us both told us very clearly,
long fight.
This going to be a minute.
I'll end on some upbeat news. How about that? Because as we've discussed, SAG immediately was able to say they owe DVD residuals, and those numbers had already been calculated as well. And DVD residuals are calculated based on all of the actors splitting a tiny percentage of
the gross revenue. I looked this up yesterday.
Not net?
Yeah.
I love gross. But at any rate, here's the win. Here's the win to end this episode on. We got residual checks.
Yay!
Those of us in the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. And like, also, that was hilarious. So this is before SAG finally created direct deposit for residuals. And also, so some of the way that these residuals were calculated is also per episode. So
because it's a television show.
Ultimately, I could see, because I am a solo in 2 episodes, that like the maximum amount that I would make for an episode was like $44 or something like that. And then for episodes that had 2 people in it, divide that amount in half. For episodes that had 3, divide it equally in 3. So I get an individual check for every episode. I'm in 106 because that includes the Q&As. So our mailbox was like jam packed. It was so hard to pull them out. You could feel how hard the mailman had worked to fill the box. And then he had to do it again the next day. Like he had to go like, I will return with more of these tomorrow. It's 108 envelopes to open. It's
108 checks to sign.
Yes, 106 checks to endorse, but also like I needed to just to make sure I wasn't missing any. I had to put them all in order and count and make sure that like everything was accounted for.
Right.
And like go to the bank with it was like so much accounting work just to like receive my money. And then even on an ATM, you can only put in 10 checks at a time.
It's just like,
So it's just like I live here now. Just like
but I just imagine the person in line behind you thinking you are bawling so hard. Like, wow, look at all those checks.
We're actually, yeah. So I actually meant to look it up. And maybe I can put a little, just read the amount on the screen if I figured it out. I think I got about $1,200
That's about right.
from that. Of course, we know that I would have gotten the most money because I'm in the most episodes, but we all got money. That actually finally happened. And I said, I was like, you won't believe how long it took. And that's partly because I was conflating these two things. But like that did take a long time.
But so how long did it take from the DVD coming out to you getting the residuals?
The DVDs finally came out in summer of 2014, like June or so, June or July 2014.
So that's 3 years later?
Yeah, no, it took 3 years. They found that money no problem. But I do think that when, Bernie started sending these emails saying like, we'll be complying with everything that SAG says we owe, I think he thought it was going to be another couple $1,000s.
And we'll find out more next time.
Next time.